welcome to another episode of Talking Politics here at The Hindu with me, Nistula Hebbar, where we unpack the news making the headlines in domestic politics. This week was even more newsy than the last one, with a tough set of Rajya Sabha polls, court cases, asking that MLAs who have been in jail for under various sections, not convicted, can be allowed to vote or not, and the notification of dates for election to the post of President of India. The country will get a new president, said the Election Commission, on July 21st, when results of the polling taking place on July 18th will be announced. This was not, however, the issue that dominated headlines the whole of last week. Starting from Sunday itself, that distinction belonged to the BJP's action of suspending its national spokesperson Nupur Sharma and the Delhi unit of the BJP expelling the head of its media cell, Naveen Kumar Jindal, over making statements not consistent with the party's views on various issues, namely communal sort of statements and statements which uh, were not in line with what the party thought and were kind of hate statements against Prophet Muhammad. Why did this happen? Why was such a big deal made of this, and what challenges does this throw up for the BJP going ahead now that the party has been in power for the last 8 years? This episode of Talking Politics will be dealing with all these questions. So, exactly what happened last Sunday that led to so much of churning within the BJP and a diplomatic furor across much of West Asia and even in some parts of Southeast Asia? Well, the BJP on Sunday announced the suspension of its spokesperson, Nupur Sharma, and the Delhi unit of the party expelled its media head, Naveen Kumar Jindal, from the primary membership of the party following objectionable and communal statements made by them on Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. The action came even as violence had broken out in Kanpur, citing these remarks as a reason for provocation, and a diplomatic furor had broken out that very day between India and several countries of West Asia over these remarks. Qatar was the first country to formally object to these remarks, summoning the Indian ambassador there, Deepak Mittal, and conveying the Qatari government's displeasure over the issue. A very delicate situation for the Indian government, as India's Vice President, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, had just arrived in that country, in Qatar, on an official visit. Social media campaigns had raised the pitch on this issue, with a call to boycott Indian goods also making the rounds. The objections raised by Qatar had a domino effect in the region and beyond, with many countries following suit, many Islamic countries or countries with very significant Muslim populations, theocratic states, etc., like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Indonesia, and even Afghanistan, registering their displeasure and objections, strong objections to these statements. There were responses from the Indian government in each of these cases, and significantly, the national spokesperson of the BJP and the head of the media cell of the Delhi BJP were referred to as fringe elements, that these were not views held by the BJP and certainly not the government of India, and that these remarks had been made by fringe elements, terming the spokespersons of the parties as of the BJP, of the ruling party, as a fringe element. Well, basically, the remarks referred to were some tweets by Naveen Kumar Jindal with pejorative references to Islam and Prophet Muhammad, and Nupur Sharma's remarks on the channel Times Now. This was a program called the Gyanvapi Files, which was aired on May 26th, and basically they were all in a similar vein. The diplomatic muddle led the BJP to first put out a suo motu statement distancing itself, without naming Nupur Sharma and Naveen Kumar Jindal, basically distancing themselves from any kind of pejorative references to Prophet Muhammad or Islam, and saying that these did not, they were not part of what the party's ideology was, what the party's thinking was, and then soon after the action was taken. But this action was taken 9 days after Nupur Sharma's remarks. So Nupur Sharma's remarks, as I said, happened on May 26th, And also, in these 9 days, there were protests by Muslim groups in India. But obviously, the diplomatic fracas that's happened following the social media campaign, etc., spurred the disciplinary action by the BJP. While the opposition parties raised the issue of a diplomatic embarrassment to the ruling party and the Indian government due to the ill advised statements by the ruling party's spokespersons, especially with countries in West Asia which have a long standing friendship with India, have been allies to us, have helped us out in very tight situations. It is within the BJP that the greatest churn seems to be taking place over the issue. The BJP, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah, has always embodied a more muscular Hindutva. The party has moved well ahead in achieving its core Hindutva goals of the construction of a Ram temple in Ayodhya, the reading down of Article 370, according special status to Jammu and Kashmir. On other issues too, the party has not shied away from flexing its electoral muscle to achieve ideological ends pertaining to Hindu identity issues. Spokespersons in such situations have felt emboldened to speak openly and, in many cases, somewhat offensively over sensitive issues regarding other communities. The sudden crackdown on Sharma and Jindal showed that the party is, as a ruling party, was vulnerable to pressures from outside the countries, and that while protests inside the countries did not move it, outside pressure did. Hence, casting a doubt on the sincerity of the reasons that the party advanced for suspending the two spokespersons. That is, if had the diplomatic furor not broken out, would this action have been taken? That is, of course, an important question. Inside the BJP and its larger ecosystem of social media warriors and supporters, people who are not exactly members of the BJP but are associated with the BJP because of ideological sympathies and value systems, there was shock and horror. Many felt that Sharma, especially, had been let down by the party, and that considering that she was now at the receiving end of death threats from extremist groups, the party should have stood by her. Sharma's statement upon her suspension from the party said that she had said what she did in the TV program as a reaction to objectionable statements, WhatsApp jokes, etc., being made over the reported discovery of a shivaling in the Vazokhana or bathing fountain of the Gyanvapi mosque during the videography, court mandated videography done there. This defense made her even more of a hero in the social media and the youngsters' WhatsApp groups, etc. Party office bearers, on the other hand, is the BJP's office bearers, people who are members of the party and have worked within the party. They have basically conveyed that the Sharma suspension and Jindal's removal was kind of a pop up event that had occurred just as the party was trying to pivot away from a polarized Hindutva rhetoric. Now, regular viewers of Talking Politics may recall that in the previous episode, which I did on RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat's call to Hindu society not to look for a shivaling in every mosque, not to raise a new issue every day, which would basically bring a barrier between Hindu and Muslim communities or other places of worship, etc., was a result of a considered decision. At the RSS Chintan Baitak in Haridwar in early April, in fact, before the Gyanvapi issue exploded via court orders, the Sangh Parivar was veering to a line that as an ideological family of the party in power, agitational language and actions were not advisable. युद्ध की स्थिति नहीं है तो युद्ध की भाषा क्यों? When it wasn't a wartime situation or an existential issue, why the language of war? That is, since many of Hindutva's goals were being slowly achieved under the current government, why use agitational language, raise demands which this particular government would have to fulfill, which it was fulfilling slowly and as per law. So why use agitational language? The BJP had also come around to the view and said that the Gyanvapi mosque matter would be decided via courts and the Constitution of India. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, had already told office bearers in Jaipur during an office bearers meeting there in May. Do not be distracted by questions on region and language put by rival parties and concentrate on saturation coverage of government's welfare schemes. Now, the party rank and file and its larger ecosystem, however, it's taking its own time to come around to this view. Once you start picking at the scabs of wounds of history on the body politic, on the memories of the country, of the nation, of previous conflicts, etc., it's a compulsive habit. It's not kicked easily. Also, rewards in the party in terms of party tickets, party positions, positions of power and influence have been linked to firebrand statements and leadership style rather than attempts at a reasonable, considered discourse. Thus, the BJP and Sangh Parivar could use the opportunity to turn the discourse to more calmer aspects of public life than religious identity. Or there could be a reverse thinking that polarization serves the party, this is a blip, and we continue as before. As I said in the last episode of Talking Politics, all of this is a conversation that the BJP and the larger Sangh Parivar needs to have within its own ideological fraternity. Whether that conversation would be fruitful or whether the genie is already out of the bottle because of 8 years of power is something that the Sangh Parivar needs to look within itself to find out. That is all I have for you this week. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.